You know those ideas that come from administration that make you question if anyone actually has any idea what you do all day? Potentially ideas that are well-intentioned, but magnificently off the mark. This episode is dedicated to those. I have affectionately named it Brilliantly Bad Ideas.
From umbrellas as holiday gifts in San Diego to walking Wednesdays scheduled during lunch, we're going to laugh, learn, and remember one essential truth. These brilliantly bad ideas are never about you.
Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Welcome to today's episode on brilliantly bad ideas that are never about you. And today we're going to talk about something that happens all the time, everywhere in healthcare. Ideas, gifts, agendas that are meant to be helpful, but often miss the mark. And they are usually coming wrapped in good intentions, and I would even say corporate optimism. Maybe we're bringing wellness, they're to improve morale, they're trying to innovate. But very often, the result is actually collective eye rolls and memes. And or it's anger and frustration and bitterness and resentment and feeling that you're not valued. And we tend to take these questions and say, do they not respect us? Do they have no idea what I do? How could they propose a Wellness Wednesday? And we make these decisions and gifts and ideas and policies as about us, that they mean something about how much we're valued or respected, and that we're not understood.
Today, we're going to explore a different lens with humor and perspective, because brilliantly bad ideas are not personal. They're just brilliantly bad.
So why do we take them personally? We were taught to over-personalize. In fact, very often, even in our childhood, it was like, you don't want to make someone feel that way. So if someone makes you feel that way, it must be intentional. And it's rarely about you. But in medicine, we are also taught that we can make other people feel certain ways, and that if someone is upset, it's because of something that we did. And so if we are upset, it's because of something that someone else did. So if you go to patient satisfaction, if a patient's upset, the person taking care of them did something wrong. And that's always the link that is raised. And so when we are upset, someone else must have done something wrong. And so we then interpret these bad ideas, whether they are gifts like umbrellas in San Diego, as meaning that they don't value us, and meaning that they don't care about us, and that this is just someone's opinion of us, when these bad ideas are literally never about us. Someone thought it would be fun to get umbrellas. I also want to point out that sometimes you want to think that they're well-meaning and they wanted to get you something useful. Sometimes they're just about not thinking. Nobody thought about it at all. Someone had to get a gift and they were like, oh, I got an umbrella once that felt, I enjoyed, or maybe they're from Seattle, right? It's just a not thinking is what I would say. And so just recognizing that they really don't mean anything. They might be checking a box. They might be meeting a metric. Having worked in a big institution, you also often have to get things from the brand store, and the brand store only has things that they have. And so you sometimes have to pick something there. So sometimes they're limited in those. I also think that we think that they are coming up with these bad ideas um, maybe walking Wednesdays, as sort of an insult, and that they should understand what we do, but they actually don't. If the proposal of maybe a person who's new to the department to do walking Wednesdays at the beginning of lunch when no one could ever get there anyway, the it actually isn't that they disrespect you, and they may not actually even be able to understand what you do because they didn't go to medical school and they don't take care of patients. And so the expectation that we have that they would understand it is potentially unreasonable. And when we get stuck in the they don't value us, then we lose that ability to connect and have a conversation. So we wanted to talk about the Hall of Fame of brilliantly bad ideas. You want to go first?
Yeah. So when a meeting that is usually mandatory somehow ends like 2 minutes early, some of the meeting leaders say things like, and look at this, the gift of time for those like 2 minutes that we're getting back because the meeting ended early.
And usually those meetings are at lunch. So you gave them 58 minutes and you get two back and you're getting a gift.
One of my favorites was getting a coaster for attending a mandatory compliance class. Like it was literally a cork coaster. And
Hmm.
then the umbrellas as a present in San Diego, true story, also occurred to me.
And a few of my favorites, one of which I've saved, and I bring it out at retreats because we're often outside and it's chilly. And this initiative was called Warm Blankets for Warm Exits. So I have my warm blanket still. And this initiative was a warm exit was that patients would like being walked out after their visit and directed in the right way. And so that the physician or the medical assistant should do this. Now, remember, I work in pediatrics. So people have children, they're getting them dressed, they're getting the stroller. It could take 20 minutes for them to make their way out of the exam room. And so I would be long into the next patient. So if I went back to do this, my entire day would be disrupted. And so it didn't matter because they still wanted you to do it. And if you walked enough patients out, someone at the front desk would check a box. And when you had walked 10 patients out, you got a warm blanket for the warm exits. And I had this really lovely medical assistant who was really worried about me because other people were getting blankets and I hadn't gotten a blanket. And so she made sure to walk out enough extra people so I could get a blanket too, which is this beautiful thing. But I have this blanket and it reminds me every time, this purple fuzzy blanket that was warm blankets for warm exits. And again, this came from a good place, right? Patients do sometimes feel overwhelmed. They're sometimes lost in the maze of the back hallways. And it would probably be helpful to walk them out and tell them where the lab is and direct them to the elevators. But the mismatch there is that it can't be people who are rooming patients or seeing patients, even the medical assistant, because while she was winning blankets, the patients were not getting roomed. And so the flow was quite disruptive. So, and these other ones don't come from me, but they came from a conversation at a retreat where this brilliantly bad ideas notion came to pass. Someone was telling me about a healthcare system that had an initiative called Bring It, which means bring us your problems. And so for anyone in healthcare, you just know how that feels. Is that really the energy that we want to bring in healthcare? Or the future is so bright, you have to wear shades. I love that one. And then one of my other favorites, a brilliantly bad idea, is that in hospitals and clinics, they're built for adults, even though I'm a pediatrician and we see children. And so in our brand new, beautiful medical building that was all built, according to specs, when we first walked into the clinic, and I was responsible for the pediatric clinic in this brand new building, the play table was right next to the fire alarm pull cord and the fire extinguisher. And so every time the children would sit there, they would pull it. And I initially was like, we have to get this changed. And of course, that was not very effective. It only took 3 polls and then they rearranged. But it was a brilliantly bad idea. And again, this was not that they didn't care about pediatrics. It was really just, I would say, a not thinking situation, right? It's more efficient to build a building where everything's in the same spot and not to think, oh, this floor is different because they see children. So I did spend some time being frustrated about that brilliantly bad idea.
And then don't forget about walking Wednesdays, where there were scheduled walks during the first 30 minutes of our well-deserved lunch, because nothing says wellness like skipping your lunch to power walk with your boss. That being said, I actually do walk a lot of the times during my lunch break, but on my own time, on my own volition, and mindfully and very intentionally by myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea of walking Wednesdays, I mean, the movement is lovely, but most people in medicine have been talking all morning. And really, they need like a pause and a moment of mindfulness and a moment of calm and quiet. And so having a meeting, well, I guess walking is better maybe than sitting in the, a hospital room with no windows. It's still depleting and not energizing. So, spending a moment here on intention versus impact, because most of the time, the intentions are aligned. Most of the time, ideas are brought forth because people do want to make things better. Nobody actually puts forth an idea with the idea of like, oh, I'm going to just really, I won't say that, make the doctors upset, right? That's nobody's ideas. They actually come to these ideas thinking that people will feel appreciated, or even that they're cute and funny. And having been a leader, it's actually really hard. Like you're trying to think of something. And I will say that pretty much no matter what you get people in medicine, because they're so depleted, they're going to have a reaction to it. Someone's going to love it, someone's not going to love it. We're trying to talk about ideas that are just not generally, most people wouldn't like them. But again, it's preference, as we've talked about recently. So recognizing that you have different ideas about what would make you feel appreciated. So we interpret it as that they don't appreciate us. And I would interpret it as they don't know how we want to be appreciated, or they don't know what would be appreciated, if that makes sense.
They simply don't know what our day-to-day lives are in clinical
Mhm.
practice. They don't live in our brain either. And the huge gap really shows up with the umbrellas and coasters.
But we think that they should live in our brain and they should know. And so this brings me to the thought that we spoke about earlier this year, and it really was applying to political situations. But we should perhaps expect brilliantly bad ideas, like mismatched ideas, and then we won't be so upset. We can expect it and accept it, and then that makes you giggle a little bit. And so this idea of humor and perspective can change your whole experience of it. And to be fair, that purple warm blanket is getting used all the time. So it is actually useful, even though the idea behind it was not so useful. And now I love it because it really reminds me to not take things personally and to recognize that very often things that seem like a good idea aren't. And it's just not that big a deal.
So sometimes, as you said, the purple blanket does serve a purpose. So it's not a bad idea. It's just irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
For instance, when my practice gets credentialing requests from a healthcare system and they give us 3 to 5 days to submit 40 plus pages of forms, as if us physicians were just sitting around waiting for faxes and emails, just twiddling our thumbs. And a reference for our prior podcast episode on their urgency is not your urgency.
And that whole podcast episode was literally based on the credentialing request, which we often have mismatched urgencies. And you do not have to absorb their urgency. And you do not have to absorb the energy of whatever idea it is, or even irrelevant idea. You don't have to follow through. You can just nod and smile and choose your response.
So when the absurd ideas appear, remember, it's not personal, it's structural, it's bureaucracy being bureaucracy. And the most powerful thing you can do is not take it on. You don't have to make sense of it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make it mean anything about your value or worth. You don't have to like any of those bad ideas. You just get to notice, smile, and choose to redirect your energy to what actually matters for you.
So the power is in your response, and you can sort of let it slide off you like a duck, which is what you're just describing. Like you don't have to take it on. You can also accept it and not like it. You can accept it and hate it. You can choose how much energy you want to bring to engaging with it. So you can choose humor over hostility, or grace over cynicism, or even perspective over panic. You can remember that their urgency is not your urgency. And literally, of course, they don't recognize that you wouldn't be able to get to a meeting right as soon as the moment that lunch begins.
It's about remembering where your lane ends and theirs begins. Their metrics are not your mission. Their timeline is not your truth. So, a few of our favorite corporate phrases that I think deserve permanent extinction and retirement out of like a lot, but especially in healthcare. We'll just circle back. This is such a gift of time. Let's just take it offline. And then this is a bit of a controversial one. And in quotes, wellness initiative, usually meaning do more with less, but smile this time. And
And take it.
sometimes it's just frankly the language
Yeah.
itself that becomes part of the absurdity when it becomes a buffer between real people and real problems.
Take it offline means come back to it later and spend your own time on it. Don't do it during this meeting. Do it on your own time. So I think humor, really just take a deep breath and have a laugh. Maybe even a moment here for a loving amusement.
So here's our closing reflection. Bad ideas aren't about you. They're about systems trying to humanize themselves and sometimes, and frankly, oftentimes missing the mark.
And keep your humor, keep your sanity, and keep your energy by remembering to laugh when you can, opt out when you need to, and keep your eyes and especially your heart on what actually matters. Remember, brilliantly bad ideas are inevitable.
You can choose humor, which can be your shield and your salve.
You do not have to absorb every initiative or slogan that comes your way. Their urgency is not your urgency.
You always have choice in what you follow, how you respond, and what you make anything mean. So the next time someone hands you an umbrella in San Diego as a gift, or declares that the future is so bright you have to wear shades and hands you a pair of sunglasses, just smile, nod, and remember it's never about you. And you can choose to accept or decline this material gift in quotations. Keep your sense of humor, keep your sense of self, and keep your lunch break.
So we would love for fun to hear all the brilliantly bad ideas that have come up in your experience in healthcare. There's something here. I don't know if it's a book or a comedy show, but please send us your ideas. You can send them to either of us by email or reach out in other ways through the podcast or any way you would like to find us. I think most of you know how to reach us. You can find ways to reach us at the healingmedicinepodcast.com. And you can reach Ni Cheng at awakenbreath.com and me at pauseandpresence.com.
Awakenbreath.org.
And we cannot wait to hear even more brilliantly bad ideas so that we can laugh a bit more and enjoy the absurdity alongside you.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find me, Chang Liang, at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence. Welcome to this mindful moment offering, inviting you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you if it's safe for you to do so. Thinking back to a time where you experienced a brilliantly bad idea. It might be from work or in your family, perhaps something that's not triggering where it would make you very emotionally upset, but something that you might find a bit of humor or amusement in. Bring that to your mind's eye, this memory. Noticing the thoughts that you have about this memory. Perhaps there's some judgment that's arising. Noticing any emotions, any body sensations. And if there's an inclination for some chuckling or even some laughter, inviting that, perhaps even a smile at this brilliantly bad idea or some sense of absurdity to the idea and what happened, opening up to the sense of humor and lightness to circumstances that you probably had very little control over, but that you can choose the response of amusement, humor at that circumstance, opening up the responses to include those more light emotions. And as you're ready, coming back to noticing your breathing wherever you feel it the most, coming back to this present moment, taking notice of how you feel now compared to just a few minutes ago. And if you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks so much for practicing with me.